Hi everyone. Today I'm going to give a very brief overview of 23 of the main neighborhoods slash community areas in Chicago. Of the people I've met in the city, probably 95% have lived within one of these areas, but of course know that Chicago is a very large place and there are many other places to live besides just these. I'll outline for each of them some of the main attractions and try to highlight the sort of people that live there and the vibe that the neighborhood gives off in general. I want to try and give a more rounded picture of these areas versus the picture you may find in travel videos or with the facts you can find on Wikipedia. These will generally be my opinions, and not everyone will agree with them, so keep that in mind. And also note that as we get to neighborhoods farther from the city center, I've spent less time in them, so my assessments may be less accurate. So, before we start, I'd like to outline a general trend, which is that the further one gets from the city center in any direction, the older the population gets and the cheaper the rent gets. That's a general trend over sort of the whole map of the city, but we'll see the differences. That's just a general outline. So, moving into first the Loop. Everyone knows the Loop, right? It's got the theater district, it's got all the architecture, it's got Millennium Park right here. But in terms of who lives there, basically no one. After 6 p.m., it's a ghost town. So, do not recommend that. Over here toward the east, you'll see what they call a New East Side or Lakeshore East. Brand new development. Basically, just sits there because of its vicinity to downtown and the parks and the lake. Probably similar to Streeterville, but very new development, and people that live there probably aren't looking to live there long term. So let's move south a little bit. Down here, you'll find the South Loop area, which is very large, bounded on top by I.W. Wells Drive. Plenty of attractions. So on the east side, you've got Grant Park, very large grassy area. You got also museum campus. They've also started building up some very new large condo buildings, apartments like Nema and One Museum Park, sort of iconic on the skyline at this time. In terms of the vibe, it's slightly older. It's just got some great older architecture. The people live there probably 30s ish. Not going to see a ton of families in South Loop, but generally slightly on the older side for this close to the city center. So now we'll take a detour on down. Let's take a look all the way down to Hyde Park. So there are plenty of neighborhoods in between South Loop and Hyde Park. But for the purposes of this video, we'll skip those. A lot of the people looking to move to the city for the first time probably aren't looking at one of those neighborhoods for various reasons. But yeah, Hyde Park, very interesting historic neighborhood. It's dominated by the University of Chicago. It's got like the Roby House. It's got the Museum of Science and Industry, Promontory Point. It's a cool area there. In terms of who's living there, a lot of people associated with the university, professors. You got plenty of students, generally on the older side of neighborhoods. But yeah, lots of green space. Very great place to be. So let's move up north. So we'll go up to Bridgeport here. I heard anecdotally someone refer to this as the place where retired cops go to live, which is not true for everyone, obviously, but it's kind of a good general benchmark. So people go to this area for the peace and quiet, for relatively affordable homes. You can also get to the White Sox Stadium quite easily there. But yeah, slightly older, fairly cheap rent as well. And now let's move up. Obviously, you got Chinatown up here, which is a great subculture, but most people probably aren't looking to move there for the first time. But here we got Pilsen. So this is a great historic Mexican American community primarily. And what you'll see here, so 18th Street, very popular shopping and restaurants along that strip. You got some industrial on the south, and East Pilsen's got some industrial as well. But it has become a lot more gentrified over time. So you might see some older sort of professional types moving in here as well, but still a very strong sort of Latino community at the core. And we'll move up here. This area, this block here, is generally called Little Italy, as well as kind of UIC area, so University of Illinois at Chicago, which is one of the main attractions there, as well as Taylor Street has some great restaurants. And the sort of community you'll see here, it's very university focused. You'll see students, professors, but there are little pockets here where you might see some families with some kids as well. Um, so yeah, that is Little Italy. Moving north is where we start to get into some of the more popular neighborhoods for around young professional types. So West Loop, um, this is very popular. Everyone knows the Fulton Market District, very upscale restaurants, bars, and whatnot, as well as some tech companies moving in there, which is quite interesting. But in general, the vibe for people that live there, it's slightly older, probably in their 30s, maybe got some kids at this point, getting a condo, but real estate is extremely expensive in the West Loop. So it's out of reach for a lot of folks looking to buy. But if we go slightly north of that up to this West Town slash Ukrainian village area, the rents and the housing prices are a little cheaper. A lot of this is very residential. You'll see a lot of families with kids and older folks living in here. However, there is the Chicago Avenue Strip, which has some great bars and restaurants that are very popular. But yeah, this is a remaining relic of the fairly cheaper sort of Chicago era. I'm sure in coming years this will become much more gentrified as well. Over here, moving west, River West, Fulton River District, they started putting up some apartments, so you might see listings for those, but really not super popular, not a lot of attractions. People aren't traveling to River West for anything really. So I don't know if I recommend that area if you're looking to move. But as we go east, you'll see some areas that are much more popular. So River North, many people have heard of. This is where you got a lot of the bars and clubs and very upscale restaurants, tall high-rise towers. The crowd that's moving here is generally sort of late 20s, maybe early 30s. You're not really going to see families here, but maybe on the slightly older end of things. So we'll continue on east. So here in Streeterville, this contains the Magnificent Mile, which is sort of the very upscale shopping district a lot of people associate with Chicago. Very close to the lake, you got lots of high rises, plenty of. There's actually a good amount of retired older folks looking to get a high rise on condo on the lake, but there's also a lot of younger folks that are moving in here, at least temporarily. Not going to be a ton of people that are moving here long term. So now let's move up slightly. So Gold Coast is somewhat similar, although slightly quieter than Streeterville. It doesn't have a lot of that expensive shopping. It's sort of leafy. You got some houses, mansions, as well as high rises, and a similar crowd. So lots of young professionals as well as people that have the money to buy sort of a mansion right on Gold Coast. So, and let's move west a little bit. Here is Old Town. And some of this area we sort of skipped over. Not a lot of it is well defined in terms of boundaries, but Old Town, which is contained partially within Lincoln Park. People talk about the bars on Wells Street. There's very popular Old Town comedy clubs. You can get to the park, the lake. It's known as being a sort of a hotspot for younger folks, early mid 20s, but a lot of Old Town is quiet residential streets. So there are plenty of families that like to live with their kids there. So let's travel back west, past Goose Island, which is a very industrial area. No one really lives there. And we'll go on to Wicker Park and Bucktown area. Some of these neighborhoods aren't as well defined as Google Maps would lead you to believe. Generally, people will refer to any sort of area in here as Wicker Park. But this is a very, very popular area. Lots of gentrification in recent years. So along Milwaukee Avenue, great shopping. Along Division, great restaurants and bars. It's even got this renovated old train line that turned into a walking path called the 606. Um, Generally, the crowd that hangs out around here is sort of um, maybe early mid 20s, but again, a lot of residential, so you might see plenty of families moving into some of these blocks. You see plenty of schools as well. But as we continue on, Logan Square is basically like the rock and roll grunge part of town. Very popular. So, like along Milwaukee Avenue, you'll see lots of great bars and restaurants. Also, on the cheaper end for home prices and rents, although that is quickly going up in recent years. And slightly older than Wicker Park, so maybe early 30s, mid 30s in terms of people that it's attracting. But again, a strong base of families living in a lot of these homes as well. So let's move back east over to Lincoln Park. We already discussed Old Town, which is contained within it. But Lincoln Park and Lakeview, we'll talk about in just a second, are fairly similar, very, very popular people, very popular places to live. If you meet a young person, there's probably a 50-50 shot they're living in uh, one of Lakeview or Lincoln Park. Obviously, tons of places, tons of things to go, pretty much anything you could possibly imagine will be here. You got the bars on Park West, the shopping on Armitage, you got the lake, pretty much everything. Pretty wide mix of ages as well. You'll see a lot of like early 20s, mid 20s, up to probably early 30s. Housing prices are extremely expensive here. So families with the means would love to buy places here. But again, it's out of reach for a lot of people. And you also have DePaul University, which has a strong core there. Moving up to Lakeview, another very large area with, and I'll note two specific areas within it. Again, similar to Lincoln Park, it's got the lake, bars, restaurants, got some live music venues as well. Fairly similar crowd, if not slightly older as well. And so the two specific areas I want to highlight, so North Allsted, LGBT community, lots of great bars and clubs within that scene here in this little strip, as well as Wrigleyville, which I don't know if it's a officially designated location, but surrounding Wrigley Field, lots of sports bars and whatnot, which attracts a lot of sort of early mid 20s folks. But again, plenty of residential surrounding this, so you might see a good amount of families as well. So moving north, you'll see as we move further north, like we talked about, this is where you can start to see, okay, as you go further north, cheaper rents and slightly older population. Uptown has some great things to do there. So, like Graceland Cemetery is actually a very calming, peaceful, probably the most peaceful place within the whole city, as well as some great live music venues. You get tons of beach and park space there as well. And in terms of crowd, you're going to see living here probably a mix, maybe slightly younger than if we move north to Edgewater, which also contains Andersonville, which is an LGBT community, a small one. And then along Clark Street, there's a lot to do, a lot of restaurants and shops, very popular. And again, getting slightly older as we go, probably 30s, 40s, generally living in Edgewater. But then we'll get to our final community area here up at Rogers Park, sort of dominated by Loyola University down here. It's got the beach, but a lot of residential, as well as the students and some older folks up here. I personally have not spent a ton of time up in Rogers Park, but from what I've seen, it seems a little quieter than if you were to go further south. So, thanks for watching. That's a brief overview of all the neighborhoods and community areas that I wanted to highlight today. Thanks.